Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is Emily with the Stella Roberts Recycling Center in Keep Pearland Beautiful. This garden lecture series, we partner with the Brazoria Master County Gardeners, and this goes in our beautification category. And we hold these lectures every second Thursday of the month. And tonight we have one. We have our presenter here, and Joanne is here to introduce her.
Hi there. I'm Joanne Nodal, and I'm president of the Brazoria County Master Gardeners, and we're really excited to be here Facebook Live with partnering with Keep Pearland Beautiful for our monthly garden lecture. Our lecture tonight is going to be herbs for fall gardening and beyond, and our presenter is Joy Arquette. We're really glad to have her. Those of us in the Master Gardener community know Joy well as one of our experts in herb gardening, especially with a lot of expertise around herbs, gardening with herbs in Brazoria County, what to plant when and when's the best time to plant. So we're really glad to have her here. Joy was joined the Master Gardeners in 2019 in our 2019 intern class, and we just love having her as part of our group. So we're going to turn it over to Joy now.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this presentation on herbs. And what we're going to talk about tonight is herbs for fall gardening and beyond. And I know for some of you are thinking, do I really want to get out in this heat and start thinking about plants. It's kind of a tough time to do that, but at the same time, this is the time that we want to plan for what we're going to do in the future over the next few months. So what we're going to talk about, a variety of things with herbs, is that generally those that do well in the fall and winter months, and then also year-round herbs and a few summer herbs. We're going to talk about care and maintenance, culinary and non-culinary uses. We're going to talk about why everyone should grow herbs at least once in their lives, and then planning for future herb gardens that you can move to in the spring and summer. And this picture here is a basil called cardinal basil. I've grown this before here in Brazoria County, and it can get 3 to 4 feet tall with huge blooms on it. So it's a really great basil herb, but this is something you're going to grow in the summer because basil likes hot weather. So why should we grow herbs at all? Well, one of the things that I like to tell people about herbs is they pretty much grow themselves. They do well in lots of different conditions, even if you're a new gardener, even if you don't know anything that's going on with gardening, but you want to have some success. Many herbs can last several seasons, though they may go through some periods of dormancy. And another good thing is a lot of herbs reseed themselves or spread easily through roots, so you can get free plants that way. Having fresh herbs are really good for chefs or just the general cook, so that they're always available when ready. If you go to the grocery store and go into the produce section, you'll see herbs that are available for sale. And a lot of times these herbs are just small samples and they're a little pricey. And if you can grow them yourself, you can easily save money and then have them available when you really need them. So why do we grow herbs in the fall? Well, frankly, here in Brazoria County in Southeast Texas, there's so many herbs that do well in the fall, into winter, and then in next spring. We have temperate weather for many months. Now, we do have occasional freezes, but one of the things you'll find is that herbs do well with freezes, and you actually don't have to do much to protect them. Another good thing about herbs in general is that they don't require too much maintenance. They really don't require fertilizer. They do well in many types of soil, though they probably best grow in composted or rich garden soil. They can grow well both in a planter or in ground, depending on what you have or where you want to plant them. So what are some challenges for fall gardening? Really for anything? Probably the biggest thing is finding transplants. Most transplants, most plants you find in the spring. And you just don't find as many in garden stores in the fall. So that is a challenge, and that trying to find those in the fall can be difficult. If one option is that you can start herbs or other plants from seed, which may require more patience and maintenance. Cold weather may or may not affect the plant's ability to survive depending on the type of herb.
Hey, they're not seeing on the,
I'm not seeing the slide.
they're not
Oh,
seeing
okay.
the slides change, so
Oh,
we're gonna
okay.
stop for just a moment.
Okay.
Hang on Facebook Live community. You want to put in presentation? Before you start, let's make sure we got it right. It's gonna take a minute to change. on here. You want to reshare the screen? You want to stop sharing and then reshare?
This is your screen sharing.
All right, there you go.
Okay, there we go. Okay.
Thank you guys for being patient.
Yeah, sorry about that. You know, technology is great when it works, and when it doesn't work well. But anyway, talking a little bit more about fall gardening. Again, trying to find transplants. You may have to start from seed, which of course is good in a lot of ways, and we'll discuss that a little bit later. And so it's just really up to the gardener if they want to try herbs in the fall. But I tell you, really have some good success with some of those that we're going to talk about a little bit later on. Okay, now I can't move slides.
We just can't seem to leave.
That's okay. You touch a screen?
No.
Right there? Okay. There we go. Okay, we're gonna hope that works. Okay. So, as we discussed briefly, why should you use seeds instead of transplants? One of the things about using seeds is they're usually available when you need them at garden centers or online. You can find seeds almost any time of the year. Again, transplant availability may vary, and a lot of times it's just in the spring that you can find transplants. You're also more likely to know which plant you're going to be getting, because sometimes transplants that you see at the garden stores or the big box stores may have plant ID markers that have been removed or misplaced. And I can tell you, I've fixed a number of those, on plants when it's just completely the wrong one that I've seen at a store, or ask the person at the store, is this really this? And then they realize, no, that's not really what it is. Seeds are less expensive than seedlings or transplants, but of course you have to have soil and a planter. You also have to have outdoor space or indoor space, depending on what you're going to use. While you're germinating seeds, you need to monitor the moisture levels and keep the soil moist until the seeds germinate. You do need light or sunlight after the seedlings emerge. And then the other thing is watching a seed come up after it sprouts and grows into a plant is really pretty incredible. So, but there are some reasons for using transplants instead of seeds. First of all, if you buy a transplant, it should have some decent roots developed. And so you've got a head start on growing that plant instead of waiting for the seed to sprout and to grow its roots and its foliage. You might be closer to the harvest time that you need if you're planning to use a particular herb for something that you have coming up. You do have to still monitor moisture levels, like with seeds. You still need light and sunlight. But with the transplants, because you had a head start, you might be able to make more cuttings than usual throughout the year. So one of the things to remember about sun and light requirements is that many plants, like herbs, like to grow in full sun. And we're going to define full sun as usually about 6 hours a day. But do remember, if you're in the southeast part of Texas or United States, or a really hot section of the country, we do have a very hot full sun environment. So sometimes our full sun is too much for some herbs. Generally, when we're talking about fall herbs, it's not as bad. But last year in September, we had a really hot September into October. And so some of those fall herbs that you may have started maybe didn't take off as well, or may have struggled some. So you just have to monitor that like you would for other plants. And the other thing with planters, just remember that sometimes they may need watering several times a week to daily in some cases. So what do herbs need? And this is in general. They need good soil or garden soil with compost added. You can grow them directly in compost. Again, light several hours a day. Many herbs tend to prefer drier conditions, though if they get really wet or we have a lot of rain, which we have had over the past few weeks with the hurricane that came through, they still generally do really well as long as there's good drainage. The one thing that is really essential for herbs and probably a lot of plants is that if you do plant them in some type of container, you do need to have a drain hole. But even if some of these things aren't done, herbs are pretty resilient. As I said before, they tend to grow themselves. They'll do well, except for the drainage thing. They have to have drainage. So planters versus in-ground planting, why would you decide to do one versus the other? With planters, whether you're planting a transplant in it or seeds, again, we talked about they must have a drain hole. But the other thing about planters, unless it's a huge planter that's really heavy, you can move it if necessary, if they're not getting enough light. You can protect it from freezes. So, moving a planter may work if you're not sure how well that plant is going to do in the place you selected. Again, you may need to monitor moisture levels more frequently, but do remember that herbs, like other plants, can freeze in planters. So there needs to be some freeze protection for plants and planters. If we look at in-ground, whether it's transplant or seeds, again, good drainage, but generally they are resilient even if overwatered. Be sure to select an area with good light exposure, because if they're in the ground, you can't really move them unless you dig them up and move them somewhere else. So that's a little more work. They may not freeze, but the light protection really helps make you feel a little bit better if we're going to get a big freeze or a deep freeze. But they don't need much because they've really done pretty well with our past few freezes that we've had. And then if starting from seeds, propagate the seeds several weeks before the suggested planting date. So if you have a transplant and it says you should plant it by October 1st, seeds would need to be started maybe around September 1st or the like. Freeze protection. Hopefully, right now we may wish we had a freeze because it's been really hot this past week. But if growing in planters, you're going to need to bring them inside or into a garage. They generally do okay in the ground, but again, you can cover them with leaves or a sheet. But if herbs are in planters and it's going to freeze, it's very likely that they could freeze and kill the root. So it's important that you think about that when the time comes. The last freeze that we had earlier this year, I had some herbs that I covered with some leaves and a sheet. I had cilantro, parsley, and dill growing, and there was no damage to any of the foliage. It just did really well. Some chives, same thing. The foliage it was a little destroyed, but it really returned well. So they're very resilient and they can handle those freezes. Now, again, if you have a really long freeze for several days, that might be a little different. But as long as that root system is protected, it's okay. So we're going to talk about some what I would call traditional fall herbs, or those that do best in the fall and winter, tend to die off when it warms up in the spring. Some of them can grow into summer. We'll talk a little bit about that. Now, remember, if you have herbs in planters indoors, they don't follow that same path. They can generally be grown any time of the year. Now, just remember that there are really no hard and fast rules on these seasons with herbs. This is information based on experience, based on resources from Texas A&M. and just the in other reputable sources, plant societies, etc. And then again, personal experience. But what you'll find, especially with herbs, is just sometimes they don't follow the rules. And you might have some that do really well and some that don't, but that's the life of a gardener. So cilantro. This is a really great plant for the fall. It can be planted when the temperatures start to fall. And it has a distinct fragrance described as crisp or clean. However, I will tell you, I have met some people that actually detest the smell and the taste. They don't like it, but they, I guess they respect the people that do. But anyway, I think it's a nice herb. It's very easily started from seed in a planter or the ground. And in fact, I've had cilantro come up in my garden for the past couple of years just from reseeding. And what I expect will happen is sometime probably late October, early November, I should have some more that all of a sudden it's just come up in my garden. We can start it early and then move it outside. If you do start cilantro, say in early September, I would keep it indoors or in the shade, well watered, until we get a little further into the fall because it really likes cool weather. Cilantro will grow well into the spring as long as the weather is cool. I've had cilantro come up in the summer. It doesn't do very well because it's just too hot. So we can essentially, if you have cilantro seeds, you can really start them September through probably February or March, and they'll do well.
So Joy, have you found that cilantro will make it through a freeze?
Yes, it will.
Okay.
Even without cover, it does really well. Now, sometimes again, the foliage, depending on how long the freeze is, how hard the freeze is, will die off. But as long as that root system is protected, it should do fine. The foliage will come back.
So one of the challenges we found, questions we get or challenges we found, we get this question often is, why is I planted my cilantro in March, and why is it already, it's June and it's dying out? And it's the large garden centers will have it in this early spring, but it's really just not the right time.
It's not the right time for cilantro, for parsley, and a number of those. And that's what kind of makes me a little crazy when I go to the garden centers or to the big box stores, and these beautiful herbs, cilantro and parsley and dill, and it's March or mid-March, and people buy it, and then like you said, in a few weeks, it's going to start looking bad. And so it's not the right time. For here, the fall is the right time. So cilantro, it will grow for a while, and then all of a sudden it'll shoot up a large green plume that produces some white flowers. As it gets to flower, the plant is starting to produce seeds, which are very tiny. Okay, and then the plant will die off. Flowering can happen anytime in the winter or spring, so you kind of have to watch for it. If you see the flowering, you can cut off that plume and it may grow a little bit longer, but it's getting kind of at the end of life. These don't grow very long, but just a few months. You can use leaves and stems, can be used in salsa, salads, or soup. Now, the thing about cilantro is it does not store well and does not dry well. There are things I've seen on the internet about trying to dry it, and it, and there are claims that it works, but I've not been successful with that. It really is more of a fresh herb, but some people may do okay with it. One of the options is to put it in ice cubes or olive oil to store. So, if you like that might work. That's not how I use it, but some people do that. The next one that we're going to talk about is parsley. Parsley is very similar to cilantro, but it definitely has a different aroma. It's really bland it doesn't really smell like anything. If you hold these two up next to each other, you can definitely tell the difference. There's lots of varieties of parsley, flat leaf, curly leaf, Italian. The one thing about parsley, it dries very well. And you can just pick some, lay it out. You want to make sure it's very dry so it doesn't develop, any kind of mold or mildew. But it can be stored for quite a while. Like cilantro, it likes cool weather. As it gets warmer, the plant may still be living and may look okay, but the leaves do tend to get bitter. It has a lot of vitamins and minerals. However, most of us won't consume enough really for any benefits. You probably have to eat a whole big bowl of it to have any benefit. You use the leaves, and parsley is used in parsley potatoes, soups, and stews. So the thing that I caution people about parsley and cilantro is, if you look at these two pictures, they almost look exactly alike. So don't trust the plant tag. If it says parsley, you're seeing at a store, you want to make sure you smell it, make sure it's not cilantro, and vice versa. That's where growing from seeds, you have a better chance of growing the right thing. So always check those plants and those plant tags. So dill. Dill is another great cool weather lover, and it's the host plant for swallowtail butterflies. One of the things about dill is it easily reseeds, and I mean easily. I haven't planted dill seeds in years, and I have dill coming up all the time in the fall, winter, and spring. You can easily use the seeds once they're produced, and they can be stored. Leaves and stems tend to be used fresh. I don't think they store very well. I think dill has a very clean smell with and it produces a lovely yellow pollen, and I think that we'll see, I think, in the next picture, and that's what produces the seeds. Some people use the yellow pollen in certain culinary dishes. It has a very delicate flavor. One thing about dill seeds can sprout at various times of the year. I've had dill come up this summer, which is unusual, but it's been the right condition for those seeds. But the biggest thing about the plants is this growth is very stunted. I actually pulled up a dill plant the other day. It didn't have any kind of fragrance or aroma. So it grows, but it's not a very good plant. The one thing about dill, if you do buy dill, a dill transplant, it's sometimes very hard to transplant that into a ground or even a pot. It's got a very long taproot. Anytime I've transplanted dill, I will try to transplant small plants, but make sure they're well watered before you do that, because they just don't like to be moved. You can use the leaves, stems, and seeds for salads, dill pickles, fish, soups, etc. So this is just a picture of the dill foliage, and this is a picture of dill pollen. And I actually had a friend. I was telling a friend of mine, "Oh, my dill is got all this pollen on it," and first thing she says, "Go out there and get me some of it." So I went and took a paper bag or a plastic bag probably, and went and wrapped it around there and just shook it and captured her some pollen because she wanted to use it in some kind of dish. You can also cut off that dill head and just lay it out and let it dry, and the pollen will fall off naturally. But you want to make sure it's in a non-vented area because it'll go everywhere. But some people do like to use that in their cooking. So next we're going to talk about what I consider more all-weather herbs. These generally do well all year, but remember, some extreme conditions may cause issues. So we'll talk about some of those as well, but these next few herbs do really well. So they'll do well throughout the year. So they could be started in the fall or just transplanted in the fall. These you're going to find in the in the garden centers in the spring usually, and that's not a bad time for them. So thyme. Thyme is a small leaf plant that's a very slow grower. But the good thing about thyme is that it can last for several seasons. And as long as you have good soil and it receives moisture, good sun, it will, do well. Now, I do have a recommendation for covering it during an extended freeze simply because I'm not exactly sure what it will do. I've grown it before. I had it in my vegetable garden, and I had one that lasted 2 or 3 years, but I think during that time, it was a few years ago, we didn't have a really big freeze, so I don't know how it would do. I would assume with a light covering, it would do fine. It does spread by underground roots, but it's really a slow grower. You use the leaves in things like Italian food, stews, soups, and sauces, and you can dry these for storage, the leaves. So that is one consideration for its use. The next one is called Mexican mint marigold, and this is a really pretty plant. It's a fall bloomer, though we have seen it bloom occasionally at other times of the year, and it blooms these pretty yellow flowers. It's also known as Texas tarragon because French tarragon may struggle in our heat and humidity. I have had gardeners tell me they find it in some of the gardening stores around the San Antonio area, more West Texas, and I think it's because it grows French tarragon will grow better in drier conditions. However, I will tell you our Mexican mint marigold grows really well here. It's a member of the sunflower family. It survives all season. It dies back in the winter, but comes back from the roots. You use the leaves and flowers, and you can use it in all kinds of things. But we've had a couple specimens of Mexican mint marigold at our demonstration garden in Angleton for several years. We do nothing with it. It just comes back. And it survives the heat. It survives the freezes, comes back from the roots. And when we have freezes and things out at our demonstration garden, when we've expected these big freezes, we really don't do anything with the plants. We kind of, it's like survival of the fittest. But anyway, it's a great plant, and it's a really pretty plant.
And does it have a tarragon flavor to it?
I guess it does because I don't, I'm not a big cook. So I do know one of our former ag agents, Stephen Brugerhoff, really liked this, and he said it was a substitute for French tarragon.
Okay,
So
okay,
that's-
so it does have that tarragon.
so it does
You
have
know
that.
it's a tarragon.
It's a tarragon. So anyway, yes, and it's a pretty plant. But with the flowers, not a lot of herbs. Most herbs have very small, insignificant flowers. This is a pretty plant with some flowers. Oregano. This is a member of the mint family. We haven't talked about mint, and we'll talk about that in a little while. It's not as invasive as regular mint, but it also does spread by roots underground. This one will produce small white flowers. It does well without much fuss. It's just one of those plants. It just grows and it does okay. You can use the leaves, possibly the stems in cooking. As long as the stems are not real woody, and that goes for a lot of herbs. You just have to be the judge if stems are old or they're too thick, if you can use them or not. Now, one of the things that's interesting about oregano, I have found hot and spicy varieties available, and they definitely have some spice to it. So you may see those in the garden store.
So I do know the traditional oregano, and it grows as a perennial for me.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
And even with the freezes we've had in the last couple of years, mine's not. I've had the same plant for years.
Yes. And did yours freeze back? Does it, or does it? No, it just hardly at all. It's just one of
Hardly
the.
look any difference at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
These herbs, some of these herbs, I want to say, they just laugh at these freezes. I mean, they just think it's like, what are you trying to do to me? So you think, I'm tough. So anyway,
That's great.
rosemary. Okay, let's talk a little bit about rosemary. The picture there is a rosemary that's in bloom. This picture was taken in January a few years ago. It has beautiful blue flowers on it. It is a hardy plant, but one of the things that we've seen here in Southeast Texas is that these freezes have really done a number on some of the rosemary plants. There were some rosemary plants in my subdivision that first freeze, Winter Storm Uri, and I think it was 2021, it just decimated them. And I've had other rosemary plants. I had some years ago at my house, and they did fine. And then all of a sudden, these recent freezes have really caused havoc with them. So if you do grow rosemary, I would definitely say make sure that you protect them from freezes. They do fine in the summer. If we don't have a freeze, they should do fine, but you just have to be cautious about that. Now, we've had several rosemary plants at our demonstration garden in Angleton. They've all died off over the last few years. Now, part of the problem is we weren't sure about how old they were. So some of them may just be old, and the freeze and just the weather overall has just caused a demise. But I would definitely say be cautious about this. Otherwise, it grows really well in most seasons. And a lot of people love rosemary potatoes. I'm not necessarily a fan, but I know a lot of people like it. And I think Joanne is here. So anyway, it's a great plant. But again, be careful with it just because not sure what's going on with that, why it hasn't done as well as some of the others. Lemon balm. This is a great plant that has some nice big green leaves. It's also part of the mint family. It's not as invasive as mint, but the leaves have a really nice lemon aroma and the leaves are very soft. It grows well in the spring and fall. It struggles a little bit in the summer heat, especially if it's in the sun, but in the shade it does well. I've got some growing in my flower beds right now. In the shade, it looks great. But the other thing that's really great about this is what I've read is it grows well in the winter and will survive to temps of 0 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, we've not been that cold yet here, and we will hope we won't. But the first freeze we had in Winter Storm Uri back in 2021, I didn't cover it. I was covering everything else. I just didn't cover it. I got tired of covering plants, and it did just fine. So it's really hardy. You can use the stems and leaves, and it can be used in teas, room sprays, or flavoring water. Nice plant. We have one out in the garden in Angleton at the demonstration garden, and it got huge this past year. Really, it still looks pretty good. It's having a little bit of problems right. It's just so hot, but it should do fine. Garlic or onion chives. Now, let me tell you, this picture I have, that's actually, sorry, I didn't realize this till I was looking at this lecture after I submitted it, but that front plant is actually Mexican mint marigold. The chives are in the background. Sorry about that. But I think most people probably know what garlic or onion chives look like. They're very easy to grow year round. They easily multiply, and I mean easily, by underground roots. And they're really, if you don't want them in an area, make sure you pull them up as quickly as possible. Those roots are hard to get out. It takes some muscles to get them out of the ground. They look similar. Onion chives have a little bit smaller leaf blade, but they definitely smell different. They have a different aroma, so you can tell the difference between garlic or onion chives. They come back from a freeze. We've had the foliage completely destroyed, and it comes back in a couple of weeks without doing anything. So you use the leaves. You could possibly use the roots. I was reading something about, I don't know what you would use that for, but I guess you could use it to flavor maybe something in a soup or stew. But it's generally used for garnishes like baked potatoes or soups, salads. The thing about the foliage is it may lose its flavor if cooked. So that's one thing to think about. Spring herbs. Okay, these are some herbs that grow best in a warm temperature but may struggle in the summer heat. So they could do well in the spring and then possibly into the fall, or again in the fall, depending on where they're at and if the roots are mulched well. So mint. Mint probably, I think it grows best in the spring. It could probably grow year round, but it's a little bit hard to tell simply because with mint, we tend to grow those in planters. Part of the reason we want to do that, it spreads like no tomorrow. It has a very vigorous root system. And even a small piece of root can spark an invasion. And if you ask anybody that's ever put mint in their flower beds, it will be there for years and it's hard to get rid of. Now, you may not want to get rid of it because it does have a nice smell. There's lots of varieties. I have some listed, and some of the newer ones are pretty cool. There's the usual spearmint and peppermint, but there's orange, has a great aroma, chocolate. And it does smell like chocolate. So it's a great one. And then mojito. Generally, you just use the leaves and you use them in teas, room springs, or drinks. It survives well in the shade, even in deep summer, as long as it's watered well. Again, we're going to grow this in a planter, so you're going to have to water it a lot. It does tend to die back in the winter, though some varieties may do all year. So again, keep well watered in the summer. Pineapple sage. So pineapple sage is a really nice plant. I put the scientific name on here just because I think it's a cool name, called Salvia elegans. I just think it sounds really, really neat. It's a type of salvia that's edible. I actually didn't know that. I've seen pineapple sage in the stores for many years, and I never thought about it being edible, but it is. It has a really nice fragrance. It grows really well in the spring. Again, it must have warm or slightly cool weather. It generally dies back in the summer, especially if it's in the sun, but it can come back from roots left in the ground. I've had some come back the last couple of years. Shade tends to help its longevity. It grows well from transplant, so you will see it in a lot of garden stores or the big box stores. So it's a great plant. That particular plant is one from my garden, and it looks like it got, about 20 inches high, something like that. But it has really pretty red flowers. So anyway, it's a nice one. I've had it where it died off in the summer and then it comes back from the roots in the fall. But as soon as the cold weather hits, it's going to die back. It's a nice plant. Summer herbs. I'm going to talk briefly about some summer herbs. First one is our typical, most common herb, which is basil. Basil likes it hot. It's got to have warm weather. You will see basil sprout. It very easily reseeds once you get it started. You will see it sprout even in the fall and winter, but those plants don't survive long. Generally, if you have planted basil and it's reseeded, you will see them start popping up in your garden late April, early May. Again, depending on the temperature, whenever the seed thinks it's time for itself to grow, it will do that. There's an exception on that as far as one of the basils called African blue basil. African blue basil does not make seeds and has to be propagated from stems. You don't see a lot of African blue basil in this area, though I have found it. It gets really big. I've had one grow about 4 feet wide and about 3 feet tall, and lots of flowers on it. So anyway, but basil in general, there's lots of varieties available. Like other plants, it makes flowers and then makes seeds and then dies off. And that's the typical life cycle of these plants. Generally use the leaves, possibly the stems, as long as they're small and tender. You can use the flowers in Italian food and Mexican food. And again, highly prolific seed production. If you look at the picture, and you take one of those little flowers that's kind of purplish white, there's at least 4 or 5 seeds in there, and they make lots of flowers, so there's lots of seeds. So, but if they do reseed in the area you don't like, they're really easy to pull up. So, again, kind of talked about that already. Easily reseeds. There's lots of varieties: Genovese, lemon, lime, Thai, holy basil, cardinal basil. There's a picture, I think, on the next slide, is considered a Texas superstar. And if you want to hear about Texas superstars, we should ask Joanne to do her superstar lecture. Bees love these. I noticed the last couple of years when it was really hot in the summer, I just kind of let basil grow in my garden when nothing else was growing except for okra. And the bees just love it. They're looking for that. And so I tend to let it just grow and give the bees what they're looking for. So anyway, it does very well, whether it's dry or wet, and has very little disease. And so here's some pictures of a few basil varieties. Genovese, very pretty basil. I think it's got the best fragrance. It's just lovely. It's used a lot in Italian foods. There's some big leaf basil and some smaller Genovese or the Italian basil, but it's nice. Thai basil, that particular Thai basil has a very long flower head, so that it will make a lot of seeds. And then the cardinal basil. So if you look at that picture of the cardinal basil, that big bloom area is like something that would fit in your hand. It's just huge, and it's really nice. It's probably not quite as fragrant as Genovese, but it's really it's a pretty plant. Turmeric. This must have warm weather. It grows from roots when the temps are warm. Roots can overwinter in the ground, and then they just sprout when it warms up. It looks like a ginger plant, but doesn't bloom. Even though I've had some master gardeners say they've had some that have bloomed, I've never seen it bloom. We use the roots. It has medicinal and culinary uses, and it is supposed to be really good as an anti-inflammatory and promotes cardiovascular health, which is always good. This is not the best picture. This was taken a couple of years ago. This year, our turmeric is growing like a weed down in Angleton. It's probably 3 or 4 feet tall. I've never seen it so big. I'm not sure why. I don't know if just all the rain we've had has really made a huge difference. But one of the things when we're ready to harvest it, again, you use the roots. Usually the foliage will die off. The roots will actually continue to grow after the foliage dies off. So we don't pull them out of the ground too early. We leave them for a little while. Now, of course, you want to remember where it is. If you don't have foliage, you may not remember what's there. But just a thought with that. So seed and plant catalog resources. So these are some catalogs or plant or seed companies that I've gotten seeds from. Yes, I bought seeds from all of these places. So just a couple of notations about them. Johnny's Selected Seeds and Baker Creek Rare Seeds have some really awesome catalogs. And in fact, the Baker Creek Rare Seeds catalog is just beautiful. If you like plants, it's got great looking plants in it. So if you order from them, they will send you a catalog. And I think you can actually purchase a Baker Creek Rare Seeds catalog if you don't order anything from them. But there's lots of resources for seeds. The other one I wanted to mention briefly is Texas Tested Seeds. And there's just a website, not a catalog. But this is a grower in Texas. And she tests all of her seeds before she places them for sale. And she is a farmer, or was a farmer, and now she sells seeds. And she has some really excellent seeds. I've been really happy with the things I bought from her as far as vegetable seeds. And she also does some herbs, not a lot. But it's really important that we grow plants that are going to do well in our area, because if they do well in our area, that's the ones we want. Some of these other catalog companies are from other parts of the United States. So you may or may not purchase something that's going to grow well. Now, I've had pretty good luck with most of them, but I do think you have to look at where are they growing these plants and will they grow in our environment. And I think that's it. Just a quick reminder that the Brazoria County Master Gardeners have events throughout the year. We do sales, we do open garden days at our demonstration garden in Angleton, and we have other educational events throughout the year. You can find us on Facebook. And then there is our website that you can also find more information about our organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joy. No extra questions, just a reminder that we do have the survey out there. If you'll fill out the survey, we would love to hear from you, especially what future topics you'd like to hear. Thank you.